Hey everyone, and welcome back to Fact Check Simplified. Today we're talking about that time when humanity invented a near-perfect decentralized and free communication tool, then spent the next 50 years systematically breaking it, complicating it, and turning it into a high-stress engine for selling ergonomic office chairs. This is the story of email, the digital miracle we all now collectively hate. Think of it as the tale of how a brilliant, handwritten letter got chained to a billboard, forced to wear a smartwatch that screams at it every 7 seconds, and then charged a subscription fee for the privilege. We're about to distill 5 decades of technological evolution and corporate shenanigans into a single, highly caffeinated rant. It's a massive oversimplification, and honestly, that's the only way to process this madness without wanting to go live in a cave before the inevitable corporate betrayal starts. If you enjoy this highly dramatic but fun version of modern facts, please hit that like and subscribe button. Seriously, it helps us pay the electric bill for our overpriced standing desks. All right, grab an iced latte. Things are about to get unnecessarily infuriating. Let's rewind the clock. Go back, way back. Before influencers, before the cloud, before your phone became a needy digital life partner. We're in the primordial soup of the internet, the era of ARPANET in the 1970s. This wasn't the slick, commercialized web we know today. This was a rugged, text-only frontier built by and for a tiny, insular community of academics, military researchers, and government-funded nerds. They were building a network to survive nuclear war, but they ended up creating something far more resilient and chaotic. A place to argue about sci-fi novels, and in this nerdy Eden, they created email. It was beautiful, it was pure, it was, and I cannot stress this enough, incredibly simple. The first real network email, sent by Ray Tomlinson in 1971, was likely something mundane and nonsensical like "Quart UUOP." It wasn't a product launch. It was a test. A message sent from one machine to another right next to it, using the @ symbol to separate the user from the host machine. This was it. The digital postcard was born. There were no graphics, no attachments bursting with 40-megabyte PowerPoint presentations, no passive-aggressive "per my last email" signatures, formatted in Comic Sans. It was just raw text, zipping across a wire from one person to another. The entire system was built on a protocol unironically named Simple Mail Transfer Protocol, or SMTP. Simple. The architects literally put the mission statement in the name. A level of honesty we haven't seen in tech since. The philosophy behind it was revolutionary in its openness. Email was decentralized by design. There was no central email corp server sitting in Silicon Valley. Instead, thousands of independent servers, mostly at universities and research labs, agreed to talk to each other. Your university server would hold your mail, and my university server would hold mine. When you sent me a message, your server would simply tap my server on the shoulder and hand it over. It was a federation, a gentleman's agreement among machines. No single entity could shut it down. No CEO could decide to change the font for everyone on a whim. It was a public good, built on mutual trust and the shared understanding that everyone on the network was, more or less, a colleague. This trust was the system's greatest strength and its most catastrophic, world-ending vulnerability. It was the digital equivalent of a small town where nobody locked their doors because, hey, we all know each other here. The protocols didn't bother with robust identity verification. A sending server would say, "Hi, I've got a message from Steve at university.edu," and the receiving server would say, "Cool, Steve's a good guy, I'll take it." There was no digital ID check. No bouncer at the door demanding to see your cryptographic driver's license. Why would there be? The only people on the network were the people building the network. The concept of a bad actor, someone who would use this incredible tool to lie, cheat, or sell Icelandic whale meat, was utterly alien. Imagine the user experience. You'd log in once a day, maybe, from a terminal that glowed with green or amber text. You'd see a simple list of new messages. You'd read them, reply, and log out. That was it. No notifications buzzing in your pocket, no red badges screaming for your attention, no anxiety-inducing unread count climbing into the thousands. It was asynchronous communication in its purest form. It respected your time. The sender sent the message into the void, trusting you'd get to it when you were ready. It was a tool that served the user, not a master that demanded constant servitude. It was quiet, it was efficient, and it worked. This digital paradise, this elegant, minimalist system for human connection, was about to get steamrolled by the two most powerful forces in modern history, commerce and convenience. The nerds had built a beautiful, open garden. They just forgot to build a fence. And the outside world, holding a fistful of flyers for get-rich-quick schemes, was about to pour in. That beautiful, unfenced garden we just described. It didn't take long for the first uninvited guest to show up, not with a quiet knock, but by driving a monster truck through the petunias. The year was 1994, the internet was just starting to seep into public consciousness, and a husband and wife law firm, Cantor & Siegel, looked at the tranquil, academic world of Usenet, a sort of prehistoric Reddit, saw not a community, but a mailing list. They had a service to sell, help with the US Green Card Lottery, so they cobbled together a simple script and carpet-bombed thousands of Usenet groups with an advertisement. It was titled, with all the subtlety of a foghorn, Green Card Lottery, Final One. The old guard of the internet lost their collective minds. This wasn't just poor etiquette, it was a sacrilege. It was the equivalent of walking into a library and screaming through a megaphone about a timeshare opportunity in Florida. They flamed the lawyers with a fury that only terminally online nerds can muster. They sent so many angry emails that Cantor & Siegel's internet provider's server crashed repeatedly. The backlash was biblical, but it was also useless. This is where our story gets its central villain. A term so ubiquitous we forget how weird it is: spam. The name itself is a historical joke, a perfect encapsulation of the absurdity. It comes from a 1970 Monty Python sketch where a couple in a cafe tries to order breakfast, but every single item on the menu comes with spam, the canned meat product. They don't want it. They ask for something without it. But the waitress, backed by a choir of Vikings, just chants spam, 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 louder and louder. It is inescapable, unwanted, and drowns out all other conversation. And just like that, a word for processed pork shoulder became the official designation for the digital plague. The metaphor was perfect. The inbox was now that greasy spoon cafe, and every time you checked it, a Viking choir was screaming at you about male enhancement pills. Suddenly, the floodgates didn't just open, they were vaporized. The simple, trust-based protocol was defenseless. Marketers, scammers, and cranks realized that for the price of a few cents of electricity, they could blast their message into millions of private mailboxes. There was no digital postage stamp, no cost to the sender. The cost was entirely borne by the recipient, paid for in wasted time, attention, and sanity. The inbox, once a quiet space for thoughtful correspondence, became a digital landfill. For every important letter from a colleague or a friend, there were now 100 pieces of trash, get-rich-quick schemes, miraculous diets, pleas from deposed Nigerian princes who, conveniently, had chosen you and only you to safeguard their immense fortune. Here's the first brutal cause and effect chain that broke our beautiful postcard. Cause email was built on an open, decentralized protocol that assumed all users were trustworthy colleagues. Effect, this allowed anyone to send virtually unlimited messages to anyone else with a forged or anonymous return address at nearly zero cost. Consequence, the signal-to-noise ratio of the entire system collapsed, turning the inbox into a battlefield for attention where legitimate messages struggled to survive. Amidst a tidal wave of garbage, this was the internet's first great tragedy of the commons. A pristine, shared resource was being polluted and destroyed by a small number of actors, acting in their own self-interest. The original architects had designed a system for collaboration. They never conceived of a world where someone's primary goal would be to trick your grandma into wiring her life savings to a P.O. box in another hemisphere. The sheer audacity was stunning. The system wasn't just being used, it was being abused on an industrial scale. And the core technology had no answer. The gentleman's agreement was dead. Your inbox was now a war zone, and you were losing badly. Every morning, you'd log on, not with anticipation, but with a sense of dread. Armed with only a delete key, you waded into the digital sludge, desperately trying to find the one or two messages that actually mattered. The problem was obvious, infuriating, and growing exponentially. Someone needed to clean this mess up. Someone needed to be the hero. And as if on cue, a handful of companies with bright, friendly logos and promises of salvation raised their hands and said, "Don't worry, we'll fix it for you, for free." So there we were, drowning. The digital commons had become a toxic swamp, and every morning felt like another tour of duty in the junk mail trenches. The delete key was worn down to a nub. Hope was fading, and then, cresting the hill like a digital cavalry, came the saviors, not governments, not non-profits, but corporations. First came Hotmail in 1996, a name that sounds hilariously dated now but was revolutionary at the time. Then came Yahoo Mail. Their proposition was so seductive it felt like a trap, but we were too desperate to care. Give us your email, and we will slay the spam dragon for you. For free. This was the moment email began its great migration from decentralized, university-run servers to massive, centralized corporate data centers. The pitch was simple and devastatingly effective. Why use your clunky, limited storage, spam-infested email from your internet service provider when you could have a slick, web-based interface, a cool at Hotmail.com address you could access from any computer in the world? And this was the killer feature, a spam filter that actually worked. It was like someone offering to install a magic force field around your mailbox that vaporized junk mail before it even touched the letterbox. Who would say no to that? These weren't just simple block lists. The great inbox janitors, as we'll call them, were building technological fortresses. They hired armies of engineers to develop sophisticated algorithms that could sniff out spam with terrifying accuracy. They used Bayesian filtering, heuristic analysis, collaborative filtering, a whole dictionary of fancy terms. That all boiled down to one simple activity. They were reading the mail. Not with human eyes, of course. That would be creepy. They were doing it with machines. Billions and billions of emails, scanned, parsed, and analyzed by automated systems. The machine would learn what a Nigerian prince scam looked like. It would learn the telltale phrases of a phishing attempt. It would learn to recognize the scent of digital snake oil. To do this, they couldn't just read the spam. They had to read everything. Your job offer, your breakup letter, your email to your mom asking for her lasagna recipe, the confirmation for that embarrassing online purchase. All of it had to be fed into the great algorithmic maw to train the spam-detecting brain. This was the silent, unwritten clause in the social contract we all implicitly signed. In exchange for a clean, orderly inbox, we agreed to let a corporation become our digital postmaster, one who not only delivered the mail but opened and scanned every single letter. Just to be helpful, let's trace the escalation here, because it's a masterclass in market-driven problem-solving. Cause, the decentralized nature of email created a spam apocalypse that individuals and small providers couldn't handle. Effect, big tech companies offered a centralized solution-free webmail with powerful, server-side spam filtering that was vastly superior to anything else available. Consequence, millions of users migrated their primary communication channel onto these corporate platforms, effectively trading the open, federated protocol for the convenience of a managed walled garden where surveillance was the price of admission. The meta commentary here is just chef's kiss. It's a genius business move. You don't just solve a customer's problem. You become the indispensable infrastructure for their entire digital life. The spam problem was so painful, so viscerally annoying, that nobody stopped to ask about the long-term implications of the solution. We were just so grateful that the screaming Viking choir had finally been silenced. We didn't notice that the quiet cafe we were now sitting in had microphones hidden in the flower pots. The janitors came in, cleaned up the mess, and told us not to worry about the fee. They'd just be taking a quick inventory of everything we owned, said, and thought. For security purposes, of course, we cheered them on. We were heroes of our own stories. Finally achieving the zen-like state of a manageable inbox, we could communicate again. We could find that important message from our boss without scrolling past offers for low-cost pharmaceuticals. The relief was palpable. We had outsourced the war against spam to a bigger, better-equipped army. And that army, having won the war on our behalf, now controlled the territory. They were no longer just janitors, they were landlords. And we were about to find out exactly what the rent was. It wasn't money, it was something far more valuable. So, the janitors became landlords. They'd cleaned up the digital neighborhood, made it safe from the roaming gangs of spammers, and we all moved into their shiny, high-rise apartment buildings. We were grateful, we felt secure, and then the new landlord, a particularly ambitious one named Google, knocked on the door and offered us a deal that sounded too good to be true, which, of course, meant it was. They weren't asking for rent in the form of money, they just wanted a key to our apartment. You know, for maintenance and to read our diary. And then, on April 1st, 2004, a date so perfect you couldn't make it up, Google launched Gmail. The announcement was so audacious that the entire tech industry assumed it was an April Fool's joke, while competitors like Hotmail and Yahoo were offering a laughable or for megabytes of storage, forcing you into a constant, panicked ritual of deleting old messages to make space. Gmail arrived with a full gigabyte of storage. That's not an incremental improvement. That's like showing up to a knife fight with a tactical nuclear weapon. A gigabyte in 2004 was like being handed the keys to a digital cargo freighter. While everyone else was paddling around in a leaky dinghy, the marketing slogan was pure genius. A masterpiece of psychological manipulation masquerading as a feature. Never delete an email again. Think about what that really means. It wasn't just a promise of convenience. It was a fundamental redefinition of the inbox. It was no longer a temporary holding pen for messages. It was a permanent, searchable archive of your entire life. Every conversation, every transaction, every dumb joke, every fleeting thought, every medical appointment confirmation, every heartbroken confession, all of it, saved forever. For you, and, as it turned out, for them, this wasn't an act of charity, it was the business model. Google's entire empire was built on search. They had perfected the art of indexing the public web and selling ads against it. With Gmail, they realized they could do the same thing to the private web, our lives. Your inbox was an untapped universe of pure, unadulterated user intent. You email a friend about planning a trip to Hawaii. Boom, here are some ads for flights and hotels. You get a receipt for a new pair of running shoes. Bam, ads for athletic socks. Your mom emails you that your cousin is getting married. Congratulations, here are some targeted ads for wedding gifts. The spam filter was just the appetizer. The main course was turning your personal correspondence into the world's most accurate ad. Targeting engine, here is the master stroke. The pivot that created the modern internet. Cause, users hated the low storage limits of existing email providers and the constant chore of deleting messages. Effect, Gmail offered a seemingly infinite amount of free storage, encouraging users to save everything forever. Consequence, this transformed the user's inbox into a massive, personal database of their life's activities and intentions, which Google could perpetually scan and monetize by serving hyper-relevant ads across its entire network. We walked right into the world's most comfortable prison. We became digital hoarders by design. The promise of never delete freed us from one anxiety managing storage and shackled us to a much bigger, more insidious reality. Our data was no longer just a byproduct of our communications, it was the product itself. Every pizza receipt we didn't delete, every shipping notification, every flight confirmation from a decade ago became another training data point for the algorithm. Another brush stroke in the ridiculously detailed portrait they were painting of us. And what a portrait it was. They knew who we were, what we bought, where we went, who we loved, and what we were afraid of. The initial privacy backlash was fierce, but it was a firecracker against a hurricane. Privacy advocates screamed from the rooftops that this was a monumental invasion of privacy. But the convenience was just too overwhelming. A gigabyte, for free, and a search function that could actually find that one specific email from 7 years ago in less than a second. We signed up in droves. We clicked I agree on the terms of service without reading a single word, entrusting our entire digital souls to a friendly-looking algorithm. We traded our privacy for a clean inbox and infinite storage, and at the time, it felt like the deal of the century. We didn't realize we were just the raw material in a new, invisible factory, one where the final product being assembled and sold was us. So, we're all living in these massive, free, corporate-owned digital apartment complexes. Our entire lives archived in a server rack in Oregon. The landlord reads our mail to sell us bespoke dog sweaters, and we've accepted this as the price of admission. But then comes the junk mail, not the illegal, outright spam the landlord's promised to filter, but the legal junk mail, the marketing newsletters, the promotional blasts, the daily, inescapable 20% off everything you looked at once, emails from 1,000 different retailers. And with this new plague came a new, shimmering promise of control. A tiny hyperlink whispered at the bottom of every unwanted message, unsubscribe. Oh, that beautiful word, unsubscribe. It was our declaration of independence in 9-point font. It was the user's last bastion of agency in an inbox that was no longer ours. It felt like a right, enshrined in the digital constitution. You see an email you don't want, you scroll down, past the giant screaming graphics and the urgent calls to action, and there it is, often in a pale gray font designed to be missed by the human eye. A little beacon of hope. This, you think, is how I reclaim my territory. This is how I fight back. This is my hero's journey. You, the noble warrior of the inbox, are about to slay the dragon of unwanted marketing. So you click it, with a righteous sense of purpose. You click that link, and your hero's journey immediately derails into a bureaucratic nightmare that would make Kafka weep. You are not unsubscribed. Oh, you sweet summer child. You are never just unsubscribed. The click opens a new tab, a landing page. This is the first test. It's a page designed by a team of user retention specialists, which is a polite term for digital hostage negotiators. The page is plastered with a picture of a sad puppy. We're sorry to see you go, it pleads. Then comes the interrogation. Can you tell us why you're leaving? A multiple choice quiz appears. A. I received too many emails. B. The content is not relevant to me. C. I don't remember signing up for this list. D. Other. You click I don't remember signing up, which is the honest answer 99% of the time. This is often followed by an even more insidious offer. Would you like to receive our emails weekly instead of daily? Or perhaps just our monthly digest? This isn't an exit ramp, it's a negotiation. They are bargaining for a piece of your attention, trying to downgrade your annoyance from a full-blown rage into a manageable simmer. But let's say you persist. You are a hero, after all. You ignore the sad puppy and the desperate offers. You find the final confirm unsubscribe button. And then you are faced with the ultimate insult. The final boss of user hostility. The page asks you to log in, to unsubscribe from a mailing list you never wanted. From a company you bought one novelty mug from 8 years ago. You must first remember the password for an account you didn't know you had. This is it. This is the moment the hero's spirit breaks. You are now trapped in the forgot password doom loop. A fresh hell of security questions and email confirmations, all to stop a single, annoying email. Here's the chain of events that turned a simple opt-out into a psychological trap. Cause, laws like the US Can Spam Act required commercial emails to have a functional unsubscribe link. But the laws were vague on how easy it had to be. Effect, marketers and designers engineered the process with maximum friction, creating a labyrinth of surveys, login walls, and guilt trips, a masterpiece of dark pattern design meant to make you give up. Consequence, the unsubscribe button, a tool legally mandated for user empowerment, became a symbol of corporate contempt for user consent, teaching millions of people that it's often easier to just suffer in silence and hit delete. And then comes the final betrayal, after navigating the labyrinth. After resetting your password and finally clicking the confirmation, you receive a small message. Your request has been processed. Please allow up to 10 business days for it to take effect. 10 business days for a computer to remove your name from a list, an action that should take approximately 4 nanoseconds. In that 10-day waiting period, you will, without fail, receive at least 3 more emails from them. But the darkest twist is this: for less reputable senders, clicking unsubscribe did something else entirely. It confirmed that your email address was real, active, and monitored by a human being. It was a beacon that shouted, "This one's alive." Your email address was then promptly sold to 100 other spammers. You didn't escape the list. You graduated to the premium list. The unsubscribe button was a lie. It wasn't an escape hatch. It was the trigger on a trap. Your quest for control had only deepened your servitude. So your heroic quest to unsubscribe ended in failure, leaving you shackled to a dozen mailing lists you never wanted, your agency a forgotten memory. You retreated, defeated, to the relative safety of your Gmail fortress, the one place that promised order in the chaos. But just when you thought you understood the deal that the landlord reads your mail, in exchange for free rent and a clean lobby, the landlord got weird. The landlord started finishing your sentences. It wasn't just listening anymore, it was trying to participate. This was the next phase of the grand bargain. The transition from passive surveillance to active intervention. It started subtly, with a feature called Smart Reply. You'd get an email from a colleague. "Can you send me the report by 3 p.m.? At the bottom of the message, 3 little sterile-looking buttons would appear, generated by an all-knowing algorithm. "Sure, I'll send it over." "Sounds good. I'm on it." It was presented as a miracle of convenience. A single tap to reply. A triumph of productivity. Who has the time to type out a full sentence anymore? We're busy people. But let's be honest, it was next-level creepy. It was like having a psychic roommate who, the moment you received a text, whispered 3 socially acceptable responses in your ear. The convenience was undeniable, but the implication was chilling. The machine wasn't just scanning for keywords like Hawaii or running shoes anymore. It was now demonstrating a deep, contextual understanding of your conversations. It understood tone. It understood intent. It understood professional obligation. And it was learning, with every single click, which of its pre-packaged personalities you were most likely to adopt. You weren't just answering an email. You were providing free A/B testing for an AI learning how to mimic human interaction. Then, inevitably, came the escalation. Smart Compose. If Smart Reply was the AI suggesting dialogue options, Smart Compose was the AI grabbing the pen out of your hand and writing the letter for you. You'd start typing, "Hey, just wanted to follow up," and a ghostly gray text would appear, completing the sentence for you. "On our meeting from yesterday." Hit tab, and the machine's thought becomes your own. It was autocomplete on steroids, a plagiarism machine for your own future thoughts. It knew how you wrote. It knew your common phrases. It knew you always ended emails to your boss with a slightly too formal best regards. The system was turning your inbox from a static archive into a living, breathing billboard for a version of yourself curated by Google. The ads in the sidebar were now the least of your worries. The entire interface was a subtle, persistent ad for algorithmic efficiency. It was selling you a solution to a problem it had helped create. The problem: you have too much email to deal with. The solution: let our robot handle it for you. Let our robot think for you, write for you, be you. Your unique human voice, your quirks of phrasing, were being smoothed out, replaced by the sanitized, optimized, and utterly soulless prose of the machine. Here's the terrifyingly brilliant progression. Cause, to deepen its data moat and make its service stickier, Google needed to evolve beyond mere ad targeting and become an indispensable assistant. Effect, it rolled out predictive AI features like Smart Reply and Smart Compose that actively participated in the user's conversations, saving them seconds of typing time. Consequence: users began subconsciously outsourcing their communication to an algorithm, which in turn gathered unparalleled data on the nuances of human language and intent, further perfecting the system designed to predict and influence their behavior. The meta commentary is that we were so busy celebrating the seconds we saved that we never stopped to ask what we were giving up. We were training our own replacement. Every time you clicked a smart reply, you were teaching the machine how a human responds. You were giving it the gift of your personality, one data point at a time. The goal was no longer just to sell you a product you mentioned yesterday. The new goal was to predict the product you'd need tomorrow, based on an analysis of your emotional state, your professional obligations, and your social connections so deep you hadn't even processed it yourself. Your inbox was now a laboratory, and you were both the scientist and the rat. The machine knew you were stressed about a deadline before you did, and it already had an ad for a meditation app queued up. The billboard wasn't just personalized anymore, it was precognitive. And all that data, all that intimate knowledge of your life, was sitting in one gigantic, glittering, and very, very tempting digital vault. Okay, so your inbox is now a sentient being that knows you better than your own therapist, and you've more or less made peace with it. The trade-off seems stable. Your digital life is hyper-convenient, and in exchange, a friendly robot uses your soul to sell you socks. Fine, but then another email slides into your inbox. It doesn't have a flashy subject line. There's no urgent call to action. It's quiet, professional, and utterly soul-crushing. The subject line is a masterpiece of corporate euphemism, an important update regarding your data. You don't even recognize the sender at first. Acrobatic ferret designs, the glorious Muffin Co. Who are these people? You squint, and a vague memory surfaces. Oh, right. You bought a novelty t-shirt from them 6 years ago for a themed office party you didn't even want to go to. You used your email to create an account for a one-time purchase, and you haven't thought about them since. But they, apparently, have been thinking about you, or at least, about the database where your information was left to rot. This email is the data breach notification. It is the official, legally mandated, and emotionally sterile announcement that your personal information is now in the hands of strangers with bad intentions. It's always written in the same calming, apologetic tone of a surgeon who has just accidentally amputated the wrong leg. It begins with a lie. At the glorious Muffin Co., we take your privacy and security very seriously. This is immediately followed by evidence to the contrary. They'll talk about a security incident, a third-party intrusion, or unauthorized access. They will never, ever say we got hacked because our password security was a sticky note on a monitor. Then comes the inventory of what's gone. It starts small, your name and email address, okay? That's already public. Then it gets spicier. Your hashed or encrypted password. They use these words to imply it's safe. But this is often the equivalent of locking your front door with a screen door latch. For any semi-competent hacker, it's a trivial puzzle. And then, sometimes, you hit the jackpot. Your date of birth, your physical address, the last 4 digits of your credit card, maybe even your full social security number. If you were unlucky enough to sign up for a service that really, truly had no business asking for it in the first place. Here's the chain of total, systemic failure. Cause we were encouraged to use our one centralized email address as a universal key to sign up for hundreds of online services. From our bank to that dumb "which potato are you?" quiz. Effect, this creates hundreds of potential points of failure, as hackers can ignore the Fort Knox of Google and instead target the digital equivalent of a garden shed like the glorious Muffin Co. to steal user data, Consequence, your personal information is harvested, bundled, and sold on the dark web, where it's used to launch hyper-targeted phishing scams, commit identity theft, and perform credential stuffing attacks where hackers try your stolen password. On every other website you've ever used, the burden, of course, is now entirely on you. The email helpfully suggests you remain vigilant. It advises you to change your password for their site, which you were never going to use again anyway. It tells you to monitor your financial statements for suspicious activity. You, the victim, are now responsible for the lifelong cleanup and for your troubles. As a token of their deep sorrow, they will offer you the grand prize, 1 free year of a credit monitoring service. This is the corporate equivalent of giving you a fire extinguisher after your entire neighborhood has already burned to the ground. It's a gesture designed to signal responsibility, while taking none of it. The true insanity is how numb we've become to this. We get these emails, let out a heavy sigh. Maybe change a password or two if we're feeling particularly motivated. And then we archive it and move on. It's become a routine, expected part of online life. A data breach is no longer a scandal. It's a statistic. It's the background radiation of the digital age. All that convenience of a single, central email, a single key for 100 doors, created a single point of failure not just for one service, but for our entire identity. The very system designed to bring order to our digital lives had made them exponentially more vulnerable, scattering our personal data across the internet like digital breadcrumbs leading right back to us. All right, so your data is now being traded on the dark web like a rare Pokémon card. And you've been advised to remain vigilant. The corporate overlords, having failed spectacularly to protect your information, have come up with a brilliant solution to the problem, making it your fault. The new gospel, preached from every IT department and security blog on the planet, was simple. You, the user, must become an impenetrable fortress of cryptographic hygiene. The age of the strong password was upon us, and it was the beginning of a collective descent into madness. Suddenly, every login screen became a judgmental gatekeeper. You couldn't just use your dog's name anymore. Oh no, that was a sin. Your password now had to be a 12-character long, randomly generated string of gibberish that looked like a cat walked across your keyboard. It needed an uppercase letter. It needed a lowercase letter. It needed a number. And it needed a special character, a symbol from the esoteric upper regions of the keyboard, like the tilde or the caret, that you have intentionally typed since 1998. The website for your local pizza place now required a password with the same complexity as the launch codes for a nuclear submarine. This was security theater at its finest. It was a performance designed to create the illusion of security. Your password must not contain any dictionary words. Your password cannot be the same as your last 5 passwords. Your password must be changed every 90 days. These rules weren't just guidelines, they were commandments, enforced by angry red error messages that shamed your pathetic attempts at memory. You'd spend 5 minutes crafting what you believed to be a masterpiece of unguessable nonsense, only to be told, error, your password cannot contain sequential characters like 123. This created the great password paradox. The more complex the rules became, the stupider and less secure our passwords actually were. No human being can remember JHEPZ and QX. 4B for their bank, L9K asterisk FG to $VR for their email, and M3HCV8WPE for the account they made to read one single news article. It's a cognitive impossibility. So what did we do? We cheated. We developed clever, predictable little systems that followed the rules while being laughably insecure. Your one strong password became Summer 2023 for one site, Summer 2023 for another, and Summer 2023 for a third. We'd take a base word and just change the number or the symbol at the end. We were creating passwords for the machine, not for security. Let's break down this masterpiece of unintended consequences. Cause and response to constant data breaches. The security industry offloaded the burden of protection onto users by mandating impossibly complex and unique passwords for every service. Effect: humans, not being cyborgs, couldn't cope. We resorted to predictable patterns, password reuse, or the most secure storage medium known to man, the yellow sticky note attached to the monitor. Consequence: the entire system became a fragile charade. Account takeovers from credential stuffing attacks skyrocketed, and the forgot password link became the most clicked button on the internet, turning the simple act of logging in into a recurring cycle of failure, frustration, and identity verification anxiety. And just when we reached peak password fatigue, tech offered us another savior, another layer of complexity disguised as a solution, two-factor authentication, or 2FA. The pitch: your password is now worthless without a second key, a temporary code sent to your phone. This was, admittedly, a huge leap forward in actual security, but it was also the final nail in the coffin of convenience. Now, to log into your email, you needed not only to remember your unmemorable password, but you also had to have your phone with you, unlocked, and ready to receive a text. Every login was now a two-step scavenger hunt. This whole mess is a classic case of blaming the user for a systemic design flaw. We were being asked to perform a superhuman feat of memory to compensate for the fact that hundreds of Glorious Muffin Co. websites were storing our data in the digital equivalent of a cardboard box. The problem was never our pathetic, human brains. The problem was the centralized, insecure architecture that made this ridiculous password gymnastics necessary in the first place. We were being punished for the sins of the services we used, forced into a high-stakes guessing game every single day, where the prize for winning was simply being allowed to access our own digital lives. The constant friction, the cognitive load, the sheer, mind-numbing annoyance of it all was reaching a breaking point, and a new industry was waiting in the wings, ready to sell us the solution to the solution to the solution. So your identity is fractured across 100 leaky databases, and every login is a high-stakes memory test designed by a sadist. You're jumpy, you're vigilant, you're exhausted. The digital world, once a place of connection and convenience, has become a source of chronic, low-grade anxiety, and into this crisis of the soul stepped a new kind of savior. Not an engineer, but a guru, not a corporation, but a cult, the productivity cult. These weren't your typical tech CEOs in hoodies. These were charismatic thought leaders with TED Talks, best-selling books, and minimalist blogs. They didn't promise better technology. They promised a better you. They promised salvation from the tyranny of the inbox. The problem, they preached, wasn't the email itself. The problem was your workflow, your mindset, your pathetic, undisciplined approach to digital correspondence. You weren't a victim. You were a slacker, and they were here, with their multi-step methodologies and proprietary frameworks, to whip you into shape. The gospel had many names: getting things done, the 4-hour work week, deep work. But the central commandment was always the same: your inbox is not a to-do list. It is not a place for reading, it is a place for processing. You must touch every email only once. You must triage it, sort it, and file it away with the ruthless efficiency of a battlefield medic sorting casualties. Your new gods were folders, filters, and keyboard shortcuts. Your new religion was efficiency, and, of course, with any new religion comes a whole marketplace of expensive relics and icons. An entire cottage industry of apps and plugins exploded into existence, each one promising to be the one true path to inbox enlightenment. There were the sorters like SaneBox, which used a supposedly brilliant AI to pre-sort your email into different folders of importance, turning your one overwhelming inbox into 5 slightly less overwhelming, but now you have to check 5 places inboxes. There were the schedulers like Boomerang, which let you snooze an email and have it magically reappear later, effectively letting you procrastinate with technological precision. You could even schedule emails to be sent in the future, allowing you to craft a passive-aggressive follow-up on Friday and have it detonate in your colleague's inbox at 8:01 a.m. on Monday. The pinnacle of this movement was the rise of boutique, high-end email clients. Apps like Superhuman, which charged a staggering $30 a month for the privilege of accessing your free Gmail account. Its selling point was speed. It was built around lightning-fast keyboard shortcuts. It turned email into a video game, where the goal was to process messages at the speed of thought. You were no longer a person writing a letter, you were a fighter pilot in a cockpit. A day trader executing transactions. It was exhilarating. It was exclusive, it famously had a waiting list. And it was the ultimate expression of the absurdity. We were now paying a premium subscription fee to more efficiently manage the free service that was monetizing our data. Here is the perfect, self-devouring snake of a business model. Cause, the constant influx of notifications, ads, and legitimate work created a state of perpetual digital overwhelm. For the modern knowledge worker, effect, the productivity industry emerged, selling apps, books, and subscriptions that promised to help users manage this chaos and reclaim their focus. Consequence, this created a new, meta-level of work. Now, on top of answering emails, you had to learn complex software, customize your workflows, manage multiple subscription services, and constantly tweak your system, all of which consumed the very time and energy the tools promised to save. The problem, which was once simply "I have too much spam," had metastasized into my tech stack for managing my productivity. is not optimized for my current Q3 objectives. We were trying to solve a human problem, the finite nature of our attention, with a technical solution, and in doing so, we just created more technical problems. We bought complicated food processors to save time chopping vegetables. But now we spend 10 minutes taking them apart and cleaning them. We were no longer just users of email. We were email administrators, inbox janitors, and productivity system architects, all rolled into one. It was a second job, an unpaid internship in self-optimization. And this entire frantic, expensive, and exhausting cult had one single, shimmering goal: a promised land, a state of pure digital grace known only by two words: zero inbox. And so we arrive at the promised land, zero inbox. This wasn't just an organizational strategy. It was a state of digital nirvana, the Mount Everest of personal organization. The productivity gurus spoke of it in hushed, reverent tones. Achieving it meant you had ascended. You were no longer a slave to the digital tide. You were a master of your own destiny. A serene warrior monk of workflow optimization. The image was seductive, a completely empty inbox, a blank slate, a testament to your focus, discipline, and control. It was the ultimate power move in the open plan office. The pursuit of this impossible dream gamified the mundane act of clerical work into a high-stakes, adrenaline-fueled battle. Your unread count was the enemy boss's health bar. Every email you deleted, archived, or replied to was a satisfying little sword swing, chipping away at its life. The productivity apps were your power-ups, your magic spells. And hitting zero? That was the victory screen. A glorious, fleeting moment of triumph accompanied by a dopamine rush so potent it bordered on addictive. You had one email for the day. You were a hero. But it was, and always will be, an unwinnable war. You could spend a furious hour in the morning triging, delegating, and deleting, finally reaching that blissful state of zero. You'd lean back in your overpriced ergonomic chair, basking in the glow of your own efficiency. And then it would happen. A quiet ping. A new message. Then another. And another. Within minutes, the enemy was respawning. The health bar was creeping back up. It was the digital equivalent of Sisyphus rolling a boulder up a hill, only to watch it roll back down the moment he reached the top. Except Sisyphus didn't have to contend with a 20% off coupon for artisanal dog food landing in his path. This turned email from a tool into a tyrant. The goal was no longer to communicate effectively. The goal was to maintain the zero. It created a compulsive, twitchy anxiety. You'd check your phone during dinner, not to connect with anyone, but to quickly archive a shipping notification to keep the count down. You'd wake up in the morning, and your first thought wouldn't be about the day ahead, but about the number of emails that had accumulated overnight. A double-digit unread count felt like a personal failure. A triple-digit count was a crisis. A four-digit count, a common sight for anyone who dared to take a one-week vacation, was a sign of total moral collapse. Let's follow this descent into madness. Cause, the productivity cult successfully reframed a full inbox not as a normal state of affairs, but as a moral and professional failure. Effect, knowledge workers adopted zero inbox as a primary goal, turning email management from a passive task into an active, constant, gamified battle against the unread count. Consequence, this generated a new, pervasive form of digital anxiety, where the process of clearing the inbox became more important than the content of the emails themselves, leading to burnout and a compulsive obsession with maintaining a meaningless metric. The meta commentary is that we had fallen for the oldest trick in the book, confusing activity with accomplishment. We were spending hours a week on what was essentially digital housekeeping, meticulously sorting and filing messages and mistaking it for real, productive work. It wasn't a strategy. It was a symptom of a sickness, a desperate attempt to impose order on a system designed for chaos. We had successfully transformed the communication tool into a high-score game, where the only prize was a fleeting moment of calm before the next wave hit. The entire industry built around this was selling us shovels in an avalanche. They were profiting from our desperation, dressing up a frantic coping mechanism as an enlightened lifestyle choice. The burnout was inevitable. Humans are not built for this kind of relentless, low-stakes vigilance. The dream of zero inbox was a lie because it was based on a flawed premise that you could ever be done with email. You can never be done. It is a river, not a pile. And as more and more people started to drown in that river, clutching their expensive productivity app life preservers, the big tech landlords saw another opportunity. They saw our exhaustion, and they decided to send in a robot lifeguard. Its name was Focused Inbox, and it had no idea how to swim. So you're a shell of your former self, a twitchy, battle-hardened veteran of the zero inbox wars. Your quest for digital purity has left you burnt out, paranoid, and spending more time managing your email management system than actually doing your job. You are on the verge of surrendering, of letting the digital tide wash over you and accepting a 4-digit unread count as your new spiritual guide. And right at this moment of absolute despair, the big tech landlords, specifically Microsoft, swooped in with a look of profound corporate empathy and said, "You look tired. Let us do that for you." Enter the Robot Lifeguard. Its official name was Focused Inbox, a feature rolled out with messianic fervor for Outlook users. Google had a similar version with its Priority Inbox. But Microsoft perfected the art of the paternalistic algorithm. The promise was intoxicating. A siren song for the digitally weary. You don't have to fight the war anymore. We've automated it. Our brilliant, benevolent artificial intelligence will now read all your incoming mail and, like a wise and discerning butler, separate the important correspondence from the trivial riffraff. The system split your inbox into 2 tabs, Focused and Other. Focus was the VIP lounge. This is where your boss's emails would go, your client messages, the important stuff. Other was the digital back alley, the place for newsletters, social media notifications, and promotional junk. The sales pitch was that you could live your life entirely in the Focus tab. Serene and productive, only glancing at the other tab once a day, or maybe never. The robot butler had it handled. Zero Inbox was dead. Long live the Focused Inbox, except the robot butler was, to put it mildly, an idiot. It was a well-meaning but deeply confused machine that had been given a task far beyond its pay grade. The AI's decision-making process was a complete black box, a mystery wrapped in an enigma, coated in spaghetti, and its choices were baffling, heroically, catastrophically wrong. It was like hiring a world-renowned art critic to sort your mail, and he decides that a coupon for 20% off socks is a masterpiece of modern commerce, while the Mona Lisa is probably just a receipt. You don't need, cue the chaos, the job offer you'd been desperately waiting for, the one with the subject line your offer of employment. The algorithm took one look at that, decided it was probably a promotional email from a very confident company, and punted it straight into the other tab, where it lay buried between a LinkedIn notification and an ad for cat sweaters. Meanwhile, what did the AI deem worthy of your immediate, focused attention? A shipping confirmation for a package that had already been delivered 3 weeks ago. A frantic, all-caps email from your CEO about a critical server outage. The AI classified that as a newsletter and banished it to the digital cornfield. An automated happy work anniversary email from the HR software, front and center in the Focused Inbox, presented as if it were a royal decree. This wasn't a solution. It was a high-stakes guessing game hosted by a rogue AI. It transformed the experience of checking email from a chore into a form of psychological roulette. The old anxiety was I have too much to deal with. The new, far more insidious anxiety was what crucial. Life-altering information is my robot butler hiding from me right now. The feature that was supposed to reduce your cognitive load had just doubled it. You now had to check the Focused Inbox, and then with a rising sense of panic, you had to meticulously check the other inbox anyway just in case the algorithm had decided your mortgage approval was less important than a notification that someone you do know liked your reply on Twitter. Here's the chain of tech solutionism eating its own tail. Cause: users were overwhelmed by email volume, a problem exacerbated by the productivity cult's demands. Effect: Microsoft introduced an AI-driven Focused Inbox to automatically sort important emails from unimportant ones, promising to simplify the user's life. Consequence: the algorithm's unreliability and bizarre logic created a new form of fear of missing out, compelling users to check 2 inboxes instead of 1, effectively doubling their work and completely negating the feature's entire purpose. This was the ultimate act of corporate gaslighting. They created a monster, the overflowing inbox, and then sold us a monster-taming service that occasionally fed the monster our paychecks. It was a feature that existed solely to let the company say it was addressing user wellness, while in reality, it just made the product stickier and more mystifying. It gave the illusion of control while actually taking it away and handing it to a deeply flawed, opaque algorithm. You were no longer the master of your inbox. You weren't even its beleaguered janitor anymore. You were just a confused resident wandering the halls of your own digital apartment, while a robot landlord constantly rearranged the furniture for reasons you would never, ever understand. And the worst part, the landlord was now sending you push notifications about its terrible, redecorating decisions. So your robot butler is now hiding your mail from you. And you've developed a deep-seated paranoia that a life-changing opportunity is currently rotting Away in your other folder, you'd think the situation couldn't possibly get any more stressful. And then the problem escaped the screen. The problem crawled out of your laptop, slithered across the desk, and took up permanent residence in your pocket. The problem started to vibrate. This was the Great Migration. Email was no longer a place you visited at your desk. With the dawn of the smartphone, email became a relentless, ever-present companion. It was in your hand while you waited for coffee. It was on the passenger seat of your car. It was on your nightstand while you slept. And with this newfound portability came the single most destructive invention in the history of human focus, the push notification. Before this, email still had boundaries. It was asynchronous. People sent you a message, and you'd get to it when you sat down at your computer. There was a separation, a sacred space between your life and your inbox. The push notification took a sledgehammer to that wall. It turned every single incoming email, every last spammy coupon, every corporate newsletter, every pointless reply, all from a coworker, into an immediate physical event. Your pocket would buzz. Your screen would light up, a little red circle with a number inside it, the dreaded badge. Notification would appear on the app icon, screaming at you. A tiny digital scream of unread clerical debt. This wasn't just a feature, it was a rewiring of our nervous systems. It created a Pavlovian feedback loop that would make a behavioral scientist weep with joy. The buzz in your pocket became a trigger. It could be anything. It could be the most important email of your life, a job offer, a message from a loved one. Or it could be a notification that your Grubhub driver was approaching with your lukewarm tacos. The intermittent reward system was brutally effective. The possibility that the buzz was something important forced you to check every time. It was a dopamine slot machine you played 100 times a day. Pull the lever, pull out your phone, and most of the time you get nothing. But sometimes you get a cherry. And that tiny thrill is enough to keep you pulling that lever again and again and again. This turned our phones from tools into tiny, demanding tyrants. They became anxiety engines we willingly carried around with us. Have you ever experienced phantom vibration syndrome? That creepy, crawly feeling where you swear your phone just buzzed, but you pull it out and there's nothing there. That's your brain, so conditioned by the constant interruptions, starting to generate the stimulus on its own. We were so deeply enmeshed in the notification cycle that our own nerves were creating false positives. Let's trace the path from freedom to enslavement. Cause the rise of smartphones armed with push notification technology made email access constant and immediate. Effect, the asynchronous check it when you want nature of email was destroyed, replaced by a synchronous, real-time stream of interruptions that demanded instant attention. Consequence, this shattered the boundaries between work and life, fragmented our ability to focus, and created a culture of always-on reactivity. Turning our devices into sources of chronic stress and distraction, we had built the perfect machine for destroying deep thought. The very act of concentrating on a single task for more than 15 minutes became a revolutionary act of defiance. The notification machine didn't want you to focus. It wanted you to react. It wanted you to be in a constant state of shallow, twitchy engagement, and the tech companies, of course, loved this. An engaged user is a user who sees more ads, generates more data, and becomes more deeply dependent on the ecosystem. Your burnout was their business model. The irony was staggering. The technology that promised to liberate us from the office had simply turned the entire world into an office. There was no escape. You were reachable on vacation, at the dinner table, in the bathroom. The polite fiction that you would get back to them during business hours was dead. The new expectation was instant response because everyone knew your phone was in your pocket. And everyone knew it. Had just buzzed. We had taken a beautiful, simple digital postcard and strapped it to a hyperactive pager that was hardwired directly into our adrenal glands. And as we all collectively twitched and buzzed our way through the day, a few old-timers began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, we had made a colossal mistake. Maybe there had been a better way all along. So we're all twitching, our brains rewired, our focus shattered into a million tiny pieces by the notification tyrants in our pockets. And as we sit there, staring at our glowing rectangles, we feel a deep, gnawing sense that something has gone terribly, fundamentally wrong. We took a wrong turn somewhere. And we did. It's the ghost story tech history buffs tell around the campfire. It's the story of the beautiful, chaotic, and gloriously free system we threw away for the sake of a better spam filter. It's the story of Federation, the road not taken. Let's go back to the beginning, to that idyllic garden of nerds. The original design of email was, by its very nature, decentralized. Federated. What does that mean? Think of it like the real-world postal service. There isn't one single, Global Post Office Corp. that controls all mail. Instead, there are thousands of independent postal services: USPS, Royal Mail, Deutsche Post, and they all agree to cooperate. They speak a common language of addresses and postage. You can drop a letter in a mailbox in Ohio, and it will arrive in a mailbox in Tokyo, passing through dozens of independent systems that all agree to play by the same rules. No single entity owns the network. That was email. Your university could run an email server. A small company could run its own. A tech-savvy individual could even set one up in their basement, as long as your server spoke the right protocols: SMTP, IMAP, the universal language that let all the different mail servers talk to each other. It could send and receive messages with any other server on the planet. It was a shockingly socialist concept for a technology that would later become the backbone of hyper-capitalism. It was a public commons built on open standards that anyone could use, inspect, and build upon. You weren't a user on a platform, you were a citizen of an open network. You truly owned your email address in a way no Gmail user can ever comprehend. This open, federated system was powerful, it was resilient, you couldn't shut it down. But it had one fatal flaw. At least in the eyes of mass market consumers, it required a little bit of work, and it was messy. The spam problem we talked about? It was a nightmare for the administrators of these small, independent servers. The user interfaces were often clunky, designed by engineers for engineers. You had to worry about your own storage space. It was the digital equivalent of living in a self-built cabin in the woods. You had total freedom, but you also had to chop your own wood and fight off the bears, the spammers. And then the corporations came along and offered us a deal. They said, forget the cabin. Move into our brand new luxury condominium complex. The security is amazing, no bears. The plumbing always works. The lobby is beautiful. And it's all free. This was the allure of the walled garden. Gmail, Hotmail, Yahoo. They weren't just email providers. They were self-contained ecosystems. Once you were inside, everything was easy, but you couldn't leave. And the landlord owned the building, the land, and everything you put inside it. Here's the great betrayal. The moment we traded freedom for comfort. Cause the open, federated email system was powerful, but complex for the average user and was drowning in spam that small operators couldn't effectively filter. Centralized corporate providers offered a seamless, free, and convenient alternative with massive storage and superior spam filtering, attracting billions of users. Consequence: users migrated en masse, abandoning the open standard and locking their data, their contacts, and their entire digital identity inside these proprietary walled gardens, effectively killing the dream of a decentralized, user-controlled communication network. We became digital peasants living on a feudal lord's land. You don't own your @gmail.com address, you are renting it from Google. They can revoke your access at any moment, for any reason, with no real recourse. All your data, your decade of conversations and memories, is stored on their servers, subject to their terms of service, their privacy policies, and their algorithmic whims. The open protocol still exists, technically, but in practice, a handful of giant players now control the vast majority of the world's email traffic. They set the rules. They decide which emails get delivered and which get flagged as spam. A small, independent server in a basement now has a very hard time getting its mail delivered to a Gmail address because Google's algorithm might not trust it. The open commons has been paved over and replaced with a few massive, privately owned shopping malls. We ran from a system where we had control but also responsibility into a system where we have neither. The convenience was just too good, like a free, all-you-can-eat buffet where the food is slowly poisoning you. But as the poison, the surveillance, the data breaches, the anxiety started to take its toll. A few people started to wonder if it was possible to build a cabin in the woods again, a new cabin, one with better locks on the doors. A few rebels decided it was time to fight back. And so, in the smoldering ruins of our focus, a few digital conscientious objectors decided to do the unthinkable. They decided to build a new cabin, a better cabin. A cabin with steel-reinforced walls, a titanium door, and a lock so complex that not even the people who built the cabin could open it. These were the privacy rebels. And their battle cry wasn't a promise of convenience or unlimited storage. It was a sales pitch. They wanted you to pay for email. This shocking, almost offensive concept came from an unlikely place: CERN, the European Organization for Nuclear Research. This is where scientists smash particles together at near light speed to understand the fundamental laws of the universe. It's a place built on empirical evidence, peer review, and a healthy dose of paranoia about data security. In 2014, a group of physicists and engineers from this very institution looked out at the world of surveillance capitalism we were all living in and said, nope, we can do better. They called their creation Proton Mail. Their solution wasn't a better algorithm for sorting spam or a fancier user interface. It was a fundamentally different architecture, built on one beautiful, powerful idea, end-to-end encryption, or EDEE. The analogy is simple. A normal email, even on Gmail, is like a postcard. The Postman Google servers can read the entire thing as it passes through the system. An email sent between to Proton Mail users, however, is like a letter sealed in a magic lockbox. The moment you hit send, the message is scrambled into impenetrable gibberish. It travels across the internet as a meaningless jumble of characters. Only the intended recipient, using their unique, private key which only they possess, can unlock the box and turn the gibberish back into readable text. This was the radical proposition. Not even Proton Mail could read your emails. Their own system administrators, if they were compelled by a government or a hacker, could look at their servers and see nothing but encrypted noise. They had designed a system where they were physically incapable of spying on their users. This wasn't a pinky promise in a 50-page privacy policy. It was a mathematical certainty built into the code. They couldn't sell your data to advertisers because they couldn't read it. They couldn't give your conversations to a 3-letter agency because they couldn't decipher them. Privacy wasn't a feature, it was the entire product. But this beautiful, secure cabin in the woods came with a price tag. A few bucks a month. A revolutionary idea. And this is where the entire privacy rebellion slammed headfirst into the hard wall of human nature. This forced us all to confront an incredibly awkward truth. For a decade, we had complained about being spied on. We'd sighed at the data breaches. We'd bemoaned the death of privacy. And now, here was the solution, on a silver platter, for about the price of one fancy latte per month. Here's the painful economic and psychological chain. Cause: a growing awareness of mass surveillance and data exploitation created a niche market for a truly private communication tool. Effect: scrappy upstarts like Proton Mail and Tutnota offered a paid EDE mail service, making user privacy their core business model instead of data harvesting. Consequence: this forced the average person to put an explicit monetary value on their own privacy, revealing that for the vast majority, the tangible convenience of a free feature-rich service from Google far outweighed the abstract intangible benefit of paying for security. The great meta-commentary on our modern lives is the $5 coffee paradox. We will happily, without a second thought, spend $5 on a cup of coffee that we will consume in 10 minutes. But the idea of spending $5 a month to secure the central hub of our entire digital existence, our private conversations, our financial records, our entire identity, struck many as an outrageous, unjustifiable expense. We'd rather be spied on for free than pay for freedom. The rebels had built the escape tunnel, but most of the prisoners were too comfortable in their well-appointed cells to crawl through it. The service wasn't perfect, of course. The magic lockbox had its downsides, since the server couldn't read your emails. The search function was clunkier. It couldn't perform the same lightning-fast, deep content searches that Gmail could. And if you sent an email to a non-Proton Mail user, the encryption wasn't automatic. They'd have to click a link and enter a password to read the message. There was friction. It was a conscious trade-off. You were sacrificing a little bit of seamless convenience for a whole lot of security. And in the 21st century, convenience is king, emperor, and god, all rolled into one. The privacy rebels had proven that a better way was possible. They just hadn't proven it was popular, and for most of us, the choice wasn't even ours to make. Our most important email address wasn't the one we used for personal chatter, it was the one our boss gave us. So the privacy rebels built their secure cabin in the woods, and most of us just waved politely from the windows of our comfortable, surveillance-enabled corporate apartments. We made a choice, however passive, to stick with convenience, but that was for our personal lives, our pizza receipts, and our arguments with cousins. For the most important part of our digital identity, the one that actually paid the bills, there was no choice at all. You were handed your email address on your first day of work like a key to the company bathroom. It wasn't a choice, it was a uniform. Welcome to the great corporate email hostage situation. Your professional identity, the sum of your working life's correspondence, is neatly packaged in an account that you will never, ever own. Your address, first name, last name at megacorp.com is your brand. It's on your business cards. It's your login for every industry tool. It's the public face of your competence, and it belongs entirely to your boss. You are borrowing it. You are a digital tenant farmer, tilling the land, growing the crops. But the lord of the manor owns the farm, the tools, and everything you produce. Think about what's actually in that account. It's not just emails. It's a decade of your professional life. It's the contact list you've painstakingly cultivated, a virtual Rolodex worth its weight in gold. It's the sent folder, a perfect, searchable archive of every project you've ever completed, every fire you've ever put out, every brilliant idea you've ever had. It's the paper trail that proves you did your job, that covers your backside in a dispute, that serves as the raw material for your resume. It is, in short, your professional soul, and it's stored in a filing cabinet in your boss's office. The power dynamic here is absolute. Your company's IT department has God mode access. They can read your emails. They can search your emails. And they do, for all sorts of compliance and security reasons. But the ultimate power, the one that defines this entire relationship, is the power to delete. The day you quit, the day you're laid off, the day you're fired, a switch is flipped in a single, anticlimactic keystroke. Your entire professional existence is vaporized. The key stops working. The door is locked forever. Poof. This creates that frantic, slightly sleazy ritual on every employee's last day. That last hour at your desk, when you're supposed to be documenting your handover notes, but you're actually engaged in a high-speed digital prison break. You're furtively forwarding your most important contacts to your personal Gmail. You're BCCing yourself on crucial email threads, hoping the data loss prevention software doesn't flag you. It's a desperate smash and grab, trying to smuggle out a few precious pieces of the identity you built. Before the entire structure is demolished, you are, in that moment, a refugee fleeing with only the possessions you can carry. Let's map out this perfectly legal, universally accepted system of control. Cause corporations required a secure, branded, and centrally managed communication system for their employees. Effect, they provided corporate email accounts like Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace that they owned and controlled completely. Consequence, an employee's professional network and work history became the de facto intellectual property of their employer, tying their professional mobility and identity to an account they had no ownership of and could lose in an instant. It's the world's most effective leash. The longer you work at a company, the more valuable data you accumulate within their walled garden. The more contacts you make, the more integrated you become. This makes leaving progressively harder. It's not just about giving up a salary, it's about giving up a piece of yourself, of starting over, of rebuilding a network from scratch. It's a powerful, unspoken tool for employee retention, locking you in with golden, digital handcuffs. We accept this as completely normal, but it's a profoundly weird arrangement. It is like being a carpenter who has to leave all his tools behind every time he switches jobs. This feeling of profound powerlessness, of having your identity held captive by a central authority, first for convenience, and now for a paycheck, creates a deep, simmering resentment. A desire for true ownership, a system where your identity, your contacts, and your data belong to you, regardless of who signs your checks. And into this void, this aching psychic need for control and freedom, a new tribe of saviors came riding over the horizon. They were loud, they were confusing, they were holding JPEGs of monkeys. The Blockchain brothers had arrived, and they promised to set us all free. And they did it with the kind of messianic, Kool-Aid-fueled certainty that only comes from having your entire net worth tied up in a speculative digital token. The door to our comfortable corporate prison didn't just open, it was kicked off its hinges by a guy in a Supreme hoodie, holding a smartphone displaying a picture of a bored-looking cartoon ape. This wasn't a rescue mission, it was a hostile takeover of our despair. The Blockchain brothers had arrived. They didn't come bearing solutions in the traditional sense. They came bearing white papers, impenetrably dense, quasi-academic documents filled with jargon, flowcharts, and promises of a glorious, decentralized future. They spoke a new language, a high-speed patois of Web3, tokenomics, smart contracts, and trustless consensus. Their pitch wasn't just, hey, we have a better email. It was, we are about to fundamentally re-architect the fabric of digital communication, and by extension, society itself. Also, would you like to buy our token? The price is about to moon. Their grand idea, the cure for all our digital ills, the spam, the surveillance, the data breaches, the corporate hostage situation, was to put email on the blockchain. For the uninitiated, let's quickly define what a blockchain is. Using the most accurate description possible, it is the world's slowest, most expensive, and least understood database. Imagine you want to write a diary entry instead of writing it in your private notebook. You carve it onto a stone tablet, then you make 10,000 copies of that tablet and give one to every single person in your town. From now on, every time you want to add a new entry, you have to shout it in the town square. Have everyone verify that you are, in fact, you. And then everyone has to chisel that new entry onto their copy of the tablet. That is, in essence, a blockchain. It is a system that achieves security and decentralization through monumental, almost comical, inefficiency. And these guys looked at this technology, a technology designed for creating censorship-resistant digital gold, and said, "You know what we should use this for? Sending a per my last email message to Brenda in accounting." The absurdity was breathtaking. They had correctly diagnosed the disease. Centralization is the problem. Having a single point of failure and control, like Google's or Microsoft's servers, is what leads to surveillance and censorship. Their diagnosis was a perfect A+. Their prescribed treatment, however, was to amputate the patient's entire body and replace it with a swarm of robotic bees. The core promise was true ownership. By putting email on a blockchain, your identity wouldn't be tied to it megacorp.com. It would be tied to your wallet, a cryptographic address that you and only you controlled. It would be a string of random numbers and letters like 0 shab C1 to 3. This was your new, permanent, uncensorable address for life. You owned it. No corporation could take it away from you. This part of the pitch was seductive. It spoke directly to the pain of the hostage situation. Finally, an identity that was truly ours. Let's follow this hype cyclone as it spooled up. Cause, the manifest failures of the centralized web created a powerful ideological hunger for a decentralized alternative that gave users genuine ownership over their data and identity. Effect: crypto evangelists, flush with capital from the Bitcoin and Ethereum boom, proposed rebuilding fundamental internet services like email on top of various blockchains. The real product wasn't better email. The real product was the idea of better email, packaged as a financial instrument. The white paper, the token sale, the slick website with a vague roadmap, these were the deliverables. The actual, working software was almost an afterthought. This was about selling a dream of freedom from big tech, a dream of being an early investor in the next big thing, a dream of telling your boss you quit because your email client's token had just 100x'd. The revolution was being financialized before it had even started. We were tired of being the product. The Blockchain brothers offered a new deal. You could become a shareholder in the revolution itself. All you had to do was embrace the glorious, decentralized, and unbelievably complicated future they were building. The first step: relearning how to do everything you already knew how to do, but this time, with more steps. And fees. So many fees. So the Blockchain brothers have kicked down the door, not with a crowbar, but with a white paper. They've promised us freedom, ownership, and a one-way ticket to the moon aboard the SS token. But what exactly is the plan? What does this glorious, decentralized future actually look like? The pitch, when you scrape off the layers of jargon and techno-optimism, was seductively simple. It was a direct answer to every single complaint we've had for the last 15 sections. The magic word was decentralization. It was the cure-all, the panacea, the snake oil that would solve everything. Remember how Google reads your emails to sell you things? In a decentralized system, there is no Google. There's no central server, no single corporate entity with the key to the kingdom. Your data isn't sitting in a massive, glittering data center in Iowa. Instead, it's shattered into 1,000 tiny, encrypted pieces and scattered across a global network of computers run by, well, by anyone, by you, by me, by a dude in his basement in Estonia. This was presented as the ultimate form of security and freedom. If a government wants to read your emails, who do they serve the subpoena to? The dude in Estonia? The college kid in Brazil running a node between classes? The network is everywhere and nowhere at once. It's a ghost in the machine. If a corporation wants to deplatform you and delete your account, they can't. You own your identity, cryptographically secured in a digital wallet. It's yours. Forever. It sounded like the original, federated dream of email, but this time with a force field made of pure mathematics. The technical reality, however, was a masterclass in making the simple impossibly complex. Here's how it was supposed to work. When you send an email, it doesn't go from your computer to a server and then to your friend's computer. Oh no, that's web to thinking. Instead, your message is encrypted, chopped into confetti, and blasted out to this network of thousands of independent computers called nodes. These nodes all store a tiny piece of the puzzle. When your friend wants to read the email, their computer sends out a request, and all the little nodes around the world that hold a piece of your message send it to them. Their computer then, like a cryptographic Sherlock Holmes, reassembles the confetti back into your original message. If this sounds wildly inefficient, that's because it is. It's the entire point. It's security through chaos. It's like, instead of having a single, reliable bank vault, you give $1 of your life savings to every single person in a crowded stadium, and just hope you can find them all again when you need your money back. What could possibly go wrong? This leads us to the central, unspoken prayer at the heart of every decentralized network. I hope most of these strangers don't turn off their computers. The entire system's reliability hinges on this sprawling, amorphous cloud of anonymous participants keeping their machines running, updated, and connected to the internet. If a node in Estonia goes offline, the network has to be smart enough to find the piece of data it was holding somewhere else. This requires monumental redundancy. The same piece of data has to be stored on multiple nodes just in case. The result is a system with massive storage and bandwidth overhead, making it fundamentally slower and more fragile than the sleek, centralized server it was meant to replace. Let's trace the chain of ideological purity leading to practical absurdity. Cause, the Web3 philosophy demanded that no single entity could control the network's data or infrastructure, necessitating a peer-to-peer architecture. Effect, core services like email were redesigned to run on a globally distributed network of thousands of independent nodes, each storing fragments of encrypted data. Consequence, simple actions like sending a message or fetching your inbox now involved a complex multi-step cryptographic process of retrieving data from numerous anonymous sources, introducing significant latency and making the entire user experience orders of magnitude clunkier than the broken system it aimed to fix. This whole endeavor was an exercise in using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. The problem was a business model: surveillance capitalism. The proposed solution was to re-architect the laws of digital physics. We were burning down the entire city to get rid of a few corrupt politicians. The pitch was digital freedom. The reality was waiting 5 minutes for an email to load because the nodes holding your attachments were currently experiencing a power outage in rural Romania. But the blockchain brothers had an answer for that too. How do you convince thousands of random people to dedicate their computer resources to this slow-motion digital ballet? You pay them. You incentivize them with a token. And just like that, the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place, revealing a picture of a future where even the simple act of saying hello had a price tag. So we have our decentralized ghost network, a beautiful, chaotic swarm of computers all humming in unison to deliver our messages with the speed and efficiency of a sloth climbing a telephone pole. But now we have to answer the million-dollar question, or more accurately, the 5-cent question. Why would the dude in Estonia dedicate his precious electricity and computing power to storing a piece of your encrypted email to your dentist? Out of the goodness of his heart. For the glory of the decentralized revolution? Absolutely not. He's doing it for the money. Welcome to the beating, transaction-fueled heart of the Web3 dream. Incentives. To make the whole precarious contraption work, you have to pay the network operators. And how do you pay them? With the network's own bespoke, volatile, and confusing cryptocurrency. Of course, this payment wasn't a monthly subscription like the one Proton Mail asked for. Oh no, that would be far too simple and predictable. This was something much more exciting, much more gamified. This was the world of the gas fee. A gas fee, in the simplest terms, is the toll you pay to use the blockchain highway. Every single action you take that changes the state of the network can in this new world. Everything changes the state of the network is a transaction that needs to be verified and recorded by all those nodes around the world. Sending an email, that's a transaction. Attaching a file, that's a bigger, more expensive transaction. Even just deleting a message might be a transaction, and every transaction costs gas. You, the user, had to pay the toll in the form of a tiny micropayment. This single design choice took the concept of email, a tool defined for 50 years by its frictionless, forget nature, and bolted a tiny, unpredictable parking meter onto it. Before you could hit send, you first had to make sure you had enough Fmail coin, or whatever it was called, in your crypto wallet to cover the fee. You were no longer just a person sending a message, you were a day trader executing a market order. And here's where it gets truly, spectacularly insane. The price of that toll wasn't fixed. It was determined by supply and demand in real time. If the network was quiet, your email might cost a fraction of a cent to send. But if the network was busy, say, because 1,000 people were trying to buy a new collection of NFT pictures of sad hamsters at the exact same moment, that demand would cause the gas fee to skyrocket. Suddenly, sending that one-sentence reply, "Sounds good, thanks," could cost you $5, or $10, or $50. You click send, and let's trace the journey from a revolutionary idea to a dystopian microtransaction hellscape, cause in order to incentivize thousands of anonymous people to run nodes and secure the decentralized network. Every transaction had to include a fee paid to them in the network's native token. Effect, the cost of using a mail became radically unpredictable, tethered to the speculative volatility of the crypto market and real-time network congestion. Consequence, the simple, free act of communication was transformed into a constant economic calculation, forcing users to weigh the monetary cost of sending a message, thereby destroying the spontaneity and frictionless nature that made email useful in the first place. The meta commentary here writes itself. We fled from the free service of Gmail, where the hidden cost was our privacy, only to land in a system where the explicit cost was a chaotic, impossible to predict fee for every single action. Which is worse? A world where a robot reads your email to sell you a toothbrush, or a world where you have to cancel sending a birthday message to your grandma because gas fees are surging? We had traded the Panopticon for a casino. At least in the Panopticon, you could send as many letters as you wanted. This turned the user experience into a nightmare of friction. Imagine trying to have a rapid back and forth conversation with a colleague. Every reply would be another roll of the dice on the gas fee market. The send button became a source of anxiety, not relief. This was the solution. This was the grand liberation from big tech. A system where you had to perform a cost-benefit analysis before forwarding a funny cat picture. It was a solution only an economist could love, but for the true believers, the crypto evangelists, this wasn't a bug, it was a feature. And all this cost, all this inefficiency, was a small price to pay for the one true killer app of the blockchain, its most celebrated and most misunderstood quality of all. So you've reluctantly accepted that sending an email now requires a degree in microeconomics and the disposable income of a small nation-state. You've made your peace with the gas fees. You've timed your messages to avoid the NFT hamster rush hour. Why? Why would anyone endure this user-hostile nightmare? Because the evangelists would cry, their eyes blazing with the fire of the true believer. You are paying for the one thing money could never buy you in the old world, immortality, or, to use their preferred jargon, immutability, but it's uncensorable. They cried, this was the ideological trump card, the philosophical mic drop that was supposed to end all arguments. This was the feature that made all the cost and the clunkiness worthwhile. On the blockchain, once a message is sent, once a transaction is confirmed and chiseled onto that great digital tablet in the sky, it is there forever. No one can delete it. No one can change it. Not you, not the recipient, not a government, not even the shadowy, anonymous creator of the protocol itself. Your data was finally, truly, yours, and it was indestructible. This was the ultimate answer to the corporate hostage situation. Your boss can't delete your work history when you quit. A politically motivated CEO can't suspend your account for a tweet they didn't like. A repressive regime can't silence a dissident by erasing their communications. This was a system built for revolutionaries, for whistleblowers, for the oppressed. It was a platform where your right to exist could not be revoked by a higher power. It was the digital equivalent of a constitutional amendment guaranteeing your right to a digital soul, a noble, beautiful, and profoundly powerful idea. And like all profoundly powerful ideas implemented by people who've spent too much time looking at code and not enough time talking to actual humans, it had a catastrophic, world-ending blind spot. The feature was called immutability. A more accurate name would have been the unending nightmare of eternal spam. Because if the good stuff, your important work, your impassioned political speech is permanent, then so is the bad stuff, all of it. Remember the Nigerian prince, the miracle weight loss pills, the unsolicited pictures and the phishing links in the old, broken web to world. You could at least delete that garbage. You could hit report spam, and with any luck, the sender's account would be nuked from orbit. It was a temporary annoyance you could banish from your life with a single click. In the glorious, uncensorable Web3 future, that spam is now your permanent roommate. A spammer sends you a message. It is recorded on the blockchain. It is now part of the permanent, immutable history of the internet, inextricably linked to your public wallet address. You cannot delete it, ever. It will be there, forever, for anyone to see, until the heat death of the universe or the collapse of the last server running the protocol, whichever comes first. Let's lay out this chain of ideological purity leading directly to a user experience apocalypse. Cause, to prevent censorship and guarantee user ownership. Blockchain email was designed to be immutable, making all recorded data permanent and unalterable. Effect, this principle was applied universally, meaning that malicious or unwanted content, such as spam, phishing attacks, and harassment, was just as permanent as legitimate communication. Consequence: the user's inbox was no longer a private manageable space, but a permanent uneditable, public record of everything ever sent to them, turning the solvable problem of junk mail into an eternal inescapable form of digital graffiti that could never be cleaned up. The system designed to protect dissidents from censorship was also the perfect tool for an online stalker to harass their victim with messages that could never be erased. The platform that allowed a whistleblower to speak truth to power also allowed a scammer to run their scam with the comforting knowledge that their fraudulent offers would be preserved for all eternity. We had built the Library of Alexandria, but the terms of service required us to give every crank, conspiracy theorist, and Viagra salesman their own permanent, indestructible shelf. This wasn't just a bug, it was a fundamental, philosophical misunderstanding of what a user actually wants. We don't want every interaction to be a permanent historical record. We want control. We want the right to be forgotten. We want the right to clean up our own digital space. The Blockchain brothers, in their righteous quest to build a system that no one could control, had accidentally built a system that the user couldn't control either. We had been liberated from our corporate landlords, only to be trapped in a digital house where the trash could never, ever be taken out, and the keys to this beautiful, permanent, garbage-filled house. They were a string of 64 random characters you'd better not lose. So, you have the keys to your permanent, garbage-filled digital kingdom, your every thought, every transaction, every unsolicited offer for a timeshare in Florida is now chiseled into the eternal stone of the blockchain, and you've accepted this as the price of freedom. But what, exactly, are these keys? Are they a nice, memorable password like Fluffy Thicket 1 to 3? Oh, you sweet, centralized thinking innocent, of course not. That would be human-friendly. That would be convenient. No, the key to your new, uncensorable life is something far more secure and infinitely more terrifying. It's called a private key, and it is not a password. A password can be reset. A password can be recovered. There's a forgot password, link for a reason. It is the digital equivalent of a corporate safety net, an admission that humans are forgetful, fallible creatures. The private key, on the other hand, is the physical, one-of-a-kind, irreplaceable master key to a vault that contains your entire digital soul. It is a string of 60 for seemingly random hexadecimal characters. It looks like this: 8E for E9, DA for 5F. Your job is to guard this string of gibberish with your life. There are no copies. There is no locksmith. There is no customer support hotline staff by a friendly person in a call center who can help you. There is only the key and the abyss. This is the core tenet of the decentralized gospel. Be your own bank. It sounds empowering. It sounds revolutionary. But what it actually means is, be your own bank's IT department, be your own bank's chief security officer, and be your own bank's single, solitary, and deeply stressed out vault technician. The entire system of trust has been removed, and in its place is a system of absolute, unforgiving, and brutal personal responsibility. You lose that key. You lose everything. Imagine the scenario. You've diligently written down your 64-character key on a piece of paper and hidden it in a book, just like the security guides told you to. A year later, you get a new computer. You go to log into your Blockchain email. Please connect your wallet and sign the transaction. You reach for the book. It's not there. A cold dread begins to creep up your spine. Did you put it in a different book? Did you throw it out during spring cleaning? You search for hours, your panic rising with every empty drawer and bookshelf. It's gone. You don't just lose access to your email. Your email is not deleted. It's arguably worse. Your entire inbox, with all its immutable messages, is still out there, floating on the decentralized network. It is a digital ghost ship, perfectly preserved, its lights on, its engines humming. You can even see it from the shore. You can look up your public wallet address on a Block Explorer and see it sitting there, but you will never, ever be able to get back on board. You've lost the only key that proves you are the captain. Here's the chain of events that turns a simple human mistake into a digital death sentence. Cause the Web3 principle of self-custody mandated that users be the sole keepers of their private keys to eliminate any central point of failure or control. Effect, this removed all traditional recovery mechanisms like password resets, placing the entire burden of security on the user's ability to perfectly safeguard a complex and fragile piece of information forever. Consequence, a single, mundane accident, a house fire, a failed hard drive, a misplaced piece of paper resulted in the absolute, irreversible and permanent loss of the user's account and all the data within it. We've all heard the horror stories of early Bitcoin adopters who have hundreds of millions of dollars locked away on old hard drives and landfills because they lost their private keys. Now, apply those stakes to your entire professional and personal life. Every contact, every contract, every sentimental message, every piece of your identity gone. Vaporized. Not because of a hacker, not because of a corporate decision, but because your dog chewed up the piece of paper you wrote your future on. This was the liberation we were promised? A system so secure that it was more likely to lock out the legitimate owner than any malicious attacker. It was a usability catastrophe of epic proportions. A system designed by cryptographers for cryptographers, which was about to be marketed to the masses with the one thing the masses could understand: a shiny, status symbol cartoon. So, you're now the sole, terrified guardian of a 64-character string of gibberish that represents your entire life. Lose it and you're a digital ghost. This system is user-friendly in the same way a live grenade is a fun party toy. The average person, the person who still calls their nephew for help with the WIFI, was never going to adopt this. It was a fortress of solitude for the deeply paranoid. How do you sell this unforgiving, abstract, and terrifyingly complex system to the masses? You do what humanity has always done when it wants to sell something complicated. You slap a cool picture on it and turn it into a status symbol. Enter the NFT, the non-fungible token, or as it was more commonly known, the ridiculously expensive JPEG. We don't have time to go down the entire rabbit hole of what an NFT is, but here's the 5-second version. It's a unique one-of-a-kind digital receipt on the blockchain that says you own a link to an image, and in 2021, for reasons that future historians will study with the same baffled fascination as the tulip mania, people started paying life-altering sums of money for these receipts, especially if the linked image was of a cartoon animal expressing a profound sense of boredom. The Blockchain brothers looked at this speculative art market frenzy and had a eureka moment. The biggest problem with their decentralized identity system was that it was anonymous and ugly. Your address was zero shop, C1 to 3. It had no personality. It was sterile. But what if you could link that soulless wallet address to a picture? Not just any picture, but a unique, verifiable, and ludicrously expensive picture of a cartoon ape in a sailor hat. Suddenly, you weren't an anonymous string of numbers anymore. You were Bored Ape number 8746. You had an identity. You had a face. You had a flex. This was the solution, the missing piece, the key to mass adoption. Your NFT profile picture, or PFP, became your digital passport in this new Web3 mail system. Your avatar wasn't just a fun little image you uploaded. It was a cryptographically verifiable asset. Your email signature would now proudly display your Bored Ape, your CryptoPunk, your Cool Cat. It was a way of saying, not only am I a pioneer of the decentralized future, but I also had a spare $80,000 to drop on a cartoon to prove it. And this, they claimed, was the ultimate solution to spam. Forget complex algorithms and filters. The new spam filter was an exclusive on-chain country club. You could set your inbox to only accept messages from wallets that also held a high-value NFT. It was like having a bouncer at the door of your inbox who only let people in if they were wearing a Rolex, don't own a 6-figure ape. Sorry. Your message is not important enough to be read. It was a spam filter for the 1%. Let's break down this pivot from utilitarian privacy tool to gaudy social network. Cause, the anonymous, text-based nature of blockchain wallets was sterile and unappealing for mass adoption, and lacked any mechanism for social verification. Effect, the NFT PFP craze provided a way to attach a unique, visually appealing, and status-conferring digital asset to a wallet, creating a system of verifiable on-chain identity. Consequence, the original mission of creating a private and accessible email alternative was completely subsumed by the speculative culture of the NFT market, turning the project into a status game, where the primary utility was signaling wealth and belonging to an exclusive digital tribe. The entire conversation changed overnight. It was no longer about freedom of speech, privacy, or escaping corporate control. It was about floor prices, community, and utility for holders. The goal wasn't to communicate. It was to find other people who had also spent an absurd amount of money on the same collection of cartoons and congratulate each other on your shared financial genius. We started this journey trying to fix a simple digital postcard that had been corrupted by advertising. We had now arrived at a proposed solution where, to send a message, you first needed to become a certified art collector in a digital casino. The absurdity was a perfect crystalline sphere. The solution to spam and surveillance was to create a new, deeply class-based system of communication where your ability to reach someone was directly proportional to the size of your crypto portfolio. It was the opposite of the original, open, academic dream of the internet. It wasn't the commons, it was a series of gated communities. And the price of entry was a picture of a monkey. And to keep all this, the transactions, the verifications, the JPEGs secure and running, well, that would require an amount of electricity that could power a small country. So there you have it. The future of communication is a series of exclusive, high-stakes digital country clubs, where the bouncer is a cartoon ape and the price of admission could fund a manned mission to Mars. But as we all stood there, admiring the shiny, verifiable JPEGs in our email signatures, a low, persistent humming sound started to emanate from the background. It was the sound of millions of computer fans spinning at maximum velocity, a sound that, if you traced it back to its source, led you to massive, warehouse-sized data centers in places with cheap electricity, all burning a truly biblical amount of power. This was the dirty little secret behind the magic. The security that made your bored ape on right-click able. The immutability that etched your spam into eternity wasn't a clever line of code. It was brute force. It was a global, winner-take-all competition that consumed more energy than a small country. This was the engine of the decentralized dream, and its name was proof of work. Let's simplify this concept, because it's as wasteful as it is brilliant. To secure the network without a central authority, the Blockchain brothers revived a system where thousands of specialized computers, called miners, would compete 24/7 to solve a pointless, incredibly difficult math problem. Think of it as a global Sudoku puzzle where the first person to solve it gets to add the next block of transactions, including your email, to the chain, and is rewarded with a handful of the network as shiny new crypto tokens. This competition is what made the network secure. To hack it, you'd need to outsolve everyone else in the world combined, which would require an impossible amount of computing power. The side effect of this global math competition was, to put it mildly, an environmental cataclysm. These weren't laptops running in a dorm room, these were specialized mining rigs. Entire server farms packed to the gills with high-end graphics cards, all screaming away, generating immense heat, and chugging electricity on a scale that made traditional data centers look like eco-friendly tree houses. At its peak, the Ethereum network, the blockchain, where most of this NFT and email madness was happening, consumed an amount of electricity comparable to the entire nation of the Netherlands. Let that sink in. A country of 17 million people, this was the energy bill for your new spam filter. The computational power required to verify that you, in fact, own a picture of a cartoon lion was equivalent to the power usage of millions of households. The global supercomputer we had built to liberate us from Google's servers was now contributing to the destabilization of the actual planet's climate. Here's the chain reaction of a good idea spiraling into a terrible one. Cause, the need for a secure, trustless, decentralized network led to the adoption of proof of work, a consensus mechanism that relies on a massive, competitive expenditure of computational energy. Effect, this created a multi-billion-dollar global industry of crypto mining, incentivizing the consumption of colossal amounts of electricity, often from the cheapest, dirtiest sources available, like coal. Consequence, the carbon footprint of a single on-chain transaction like sending a single uncensorable email became grotesquely high, creating a profound ethical and environmental crisis that was simply hand-waved away by proponents as the necessary cost of building the future. The meta commentary is a portrait of technological nihilism. The ideology of decentralization had become so paramount that its advocates were willing to ignore any and all real-world externalities. We were, quite literally, burning fossil fuels to permanently record a Nigerian prince scam onto an immutable ledger. A simple, centralized server could have processed that same email with the energy it takes to toast a piece of bread, but that would have required trust, and in the world of Web3, trust was a four-letter word. It was better to boil the oceans than to trust a single, accountable entity. We had fled the quiet, efficient, corporate-owned prison of Gmail, run a marathon through a minefield of usability nightmares, and arrived at a solution that was slow, expensive, permanent, and actively helping to set the world on fire. It was at this point that a few people, blinking in the smoke-filled air, began to ask a very simple, very dangerous question. A question that threatened to bring the entire teetering tower of hype crashing down. Wait a second, what exactly does this do that email couldn't already do in 1972? So here we are, standing in the digital promised land, a wallet full of ape JPEGs, an inbox full of immutable spam, and a carbon footprint the size of Belgium. It is at this precise moment, amid the gentle hum of melting ice caps, that the spell begins to break. You look down at this contraption, this slow, expensive, world-burning Rube Goldberg machine, and a quiet, blasphemous thought bubbles up from the depths of your exhausted soul. What? What does this actually do again? And as the hype subsides, you begin to strip away the layers of jargon. You take away the trustless consensus, the tokenomics, the NFT-gated communities. You scrape off all the Web3 buzzwords until you're left with the raw, naked function of the thing. And what do you find? You find that the proponents of this revolutionary new system are celebrating with the unironic fervor of a child who has just discovered their own toes. The invention of sending a message. That's it. That's the killer app. After all the white papers, all the venture capital, all the electricity, the headline feature of Blockchain email was that you could type words into a box, click a button, and those words would appear on someone else's screen. It was a groundbreaking innovation, a paradigm shift in human communication, a feature that had only been a staple of digital life since the Nixon administration. Ray Tomlinson, the guy who sent the first email in 1971, could have achieved the same result with a machine that had less computing power than your smart toaster. And he did it without needing to solve a global Sudoku puzzle first. The marketing calls were surreal. They were like watching a team of brilliant engineers spend a decade and billions of dollars to invent the spoon and then hold a press conference to announce, "Our revolutionary decentralized nutrient intake facilitator allows users to transport liquids and semi-solids from a concave receptacle to their oral cavity with unprecedented efficiency." We all know what a spoon is. You invented a spoon. The features they touted were a parade of rediscovered history. They celebrated the ability to receive messages, as if this were some dark art finally unlocked by the power of cryptography. They marveled at the concept of having a unique address, where people could send you things, never mind that the new address was an unmemorable, unreadable string of gibberish that made the humble, elegant user at domain.com look like a work of literary genius. They were reinventing a perfectly good wheel, but this time the wheel was square, on fire, and cost $50 every time you wanted to turn a corner. Here is the chain of a solution completely losing the plot, cause, the ideological obsession with the how decentralization, immutability completely overshadowed the what effective communication. Effect, developers spend all their energy implementing the most basic, solved problems of messaging sending, receiving, addressing within the brutally inefficient constraints of a blockchain. Consequence, the entire project became a celebration of its own convoluted process, where the simple act of successfully creating a 50-year-old feature was hailed as a revolutionary victory, blinding its creators to the fact that the end product was objectively worse for the user in almost every conceivable way. This was the ultimate expression of tech solutionism. It was a movement so in love with its own cleverness that it failed to notice it was solving a problem that didn't exist. The email protocol, SMTP, was never the villain in our story. It was, and is, a simple, elegant, and robust protocol. It works beautifully. The problem wasn't the technology of email. It was the business model that had been built on top of it. The problem was surveillance capitalism. The problem was corporate control. These are political and economic problems, not engineering problems. The Blockchain brothers tried to solve a political problem with a cryptographic hammer. And in the process, they just built a much, much worse hammer. They looked at a beautiful, simple postcard and said, "This is broken because a corporation is reading it." A valid critique. But their solution wasn't to build a better, private mailbox. It was to first encode the postcard in an ancient, dead language, then launch it into space to be authenticated by a swarm of orbital satellites, powered by tiny black holes which would then beam it back down to a recipient who had to pay a fee. Based on the current price of platinum, the original postcard worked just fine. You just needed to stop the postman from opening the mail. You didn't need to rebuild the entire postal service out of dark matter and existential dread. But of course, the point was never really about the postcard. It was never about building a better email. The email was just the packaging. The real product was something else entirely. So, we have a square wheel on fire that costs a fortune to turn. It is an objectively terrible solution to a problem that was never about the wheel in the first place. The whole enterprise seems like a colossal, collective delusion, a triumph of ideology over common sense, and you have to ask yourself, how did this happen? How did so many smart people, with so much money, pour their time and resources into building something so fundamentally flawed? The answer is simple. The product was never the email client That was just the wrapping paper. The real product was the lottery ticket. This whole grand, convoluted, planet-burning spectacle wasn't a product development cycle. It was a venture capital hype's a clone. It was a new, breathtakingly efficient machine for turning a good story into billions of dollars. And the story of liberating email from the clutches of big tech was a very, very good story. Here's how the playbook worked. You don't start with a team of engineers building a product. You start with a team of marketers writing a white paper. This document, filled with impressive-looking diagrams and words like synergy and paradigm, would lay out the grand vision. It would identify a villain, Google, surveillance capitalism, and a hero, decentralization, the blockchain. It would then introduce the magic weapon that would win the war, a brand new cryptocurrency. Let's call it Mailcoin. Step 2, the token sale. Before a single line of functional code was written, the project would mint billions of these Mailcoins out of thin air. They would then sell a chunk of them to venture capitalists in a private seed round for fractions of a penny. Then they'd sell another chunk to the public in a frenzied, hyped-up event called an initial coin offering, or ICO. This is where they'd raise millions, sometimes tens of millions, of dollars from regular people desperate to get in on the ground floor of the next Bitcoin. The company was now flush with cash. The VCs were sitting on a mountain of super cheap tokens, and the project still didn't have a working product. Now comes the magic. The millions raised from the ICO are used not to hire the world's best engineers to solve the hard problems of usability and efficiency. No, they are used to hire the world's best marketers to pump the price of Mailcoin. They sponsor crypto influencers on YouTube. They run ad campaigns. They build vibrant communities on Discord and Telegram, where any form of skepticism is shouted down as FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. The entire goal is to generate hype, to get the token listed on major exchanges, and to drive the price to the moon. And as the price of Mailcoin skyrockets based on pure speculation and marketing, the early investors, the VCs, and the founders begin to quietly cash out, selling their near-free tokens to the new wave of true believers who are buying in at the top. The email client itself, it remains a clunky, barely functional prototype, but that doesn't matter. It served its purpose. It was the utility, the plausible excuse that made Mailcoin seem like a legitimate technology investment, instead of what it actually was, an unregulated, highly speculative penny stock. Let's trace the financial engineering that masqueraded as product development. Cause the crypto bull market created an environment of extreme FOMO, fear of missing out, where VCs and retail investors were willing to throw massive amounts of money at any project with a convincing white paper and a token effect. Founders realized that the fastest path to a multi-million-dollar exit wasn't building a successful company over 10 years, but launching a successful token in 10 months. Consequence, the entire blockchain email space became a graveyard of projects that raised enormous sums of money based on solving a legitimate user problem, only to see the founders and VCs cash out on token speculation, leaving behind a useless product and a community of bag holders. This wasn't about fixing email. This was about financializing the complaint about email. The pain we all felt, the surveillance, the spam, the lack of ownership wasn't a problem to be solved. It was a narrative to be exploited. It was the marketing pitch for the casino. They took our legitimate grievances, repackaged them in the language of revolution, and used them to sell us chips for their private poker game. The ultimate irony is that the problem of centralized corporate control was supposedly being solved by a system that was, in practice, controlled by an even smaller, less accountable group of venture capitalists and anonymous founders. We were just trading one set of overlords for another. Only this new set didn't even pretend to offer us a good product in return. And so, the hype cyclone sputters out, leaving behind a trail of abandoned projects, worthless tokens, and a lingering sense of profound foolishness. We have completed our grand tour of technological salvation. We started with a simple, elegant digital postcard. We watched it get buried in spam. We ran into the arms of a corporate landlord who promised to clean up the mess, but bugged our apartment. We got tired of being spied on, so we joined a revolutionary commune that promised freedom, but turned out to be a weird, expensive cult that burned garbage fires in the living room and communicated by shouting incomprehensible math problems at each other. After all that, we are left standing in the rubble, holding nothing but a receipt for a cartoon monkey and a deep, existential exhaustion. This is the moment the fog clears. It's the final scene of the mystery, where the detective gathers everyone in the room and reveals the killer's identity. And the killer, the true villain of this 50-year saga of frustration, was never who we thought it was. The problem was never the tech, the email protocol, the humble, 50-year-old simple mail transfer protocol was never the problem. It was an open, federated, and perfectly functional standard. It did its job. It sent the mail. It was a good and faithful servant. No, the technology wasn't the disease. The disease was the business model that was injected into it. The original sin was committed the moment someone realized that the solution to a problem could be more profitable than the problem itself. Let's look at the first act. The problem was spam. The solution offered by Google and others was a free, centralized service with powerful filters. But the solution was a Trojan horse. To filter the spam effectively, they needed to read everything. This created a new, much more valuable opportunity: surveillance capitalism. The mission was no longer stop spam. The mission became collect as much data as humanly possible to build the world's most effective advertising engine. They solved our spam problem in a way that created a much bigger, more insidious problem for society, but a fantastically profitable one for them. They didn't just fix a leak. They bought the whole water company. Now look at the second act. The problem was surveillance capitalism and corporate control. The solution offered by the Blockchain brothers was a decentralized system you could truly own. But this solution was another Trojan horse. To build this system, they needed a way to incentivize a global network of anonymous operators. This created a new, much more valuable opportunity: speculative financial assets. The mission was no longer give users ownership. The mission became launch a token and get rich. They solved our ownership problem in a way that created a chaotic, unusable, and financially ruinous casino. They didn't just liberate the prisoners, they sold them lottery tickets for a chance to buy the prison. Do you see the pattern? It is the great, self-perpetuating engine of modern tech. Tech invents a problem, or amplifies an existing one, and then sells you the glorious, proprietary, and unnecessarily complex solution. The original email was too simple to be profitable on a massive scale, so they let it drown in spam, then sold us the free life raft that spied on us. That life raft became a gilded cage. So they sold us the decentralized key to the cage. But the key was actually a ticket to a casino where the house always wins in both cases. The real product wasn't the solution. The real product was the new, more profitable problem the solution created. The problem was never that our digital postcard was broken. The problem is that we live in an economic system that can't resist turning every beautiful, simple commons into a revenue-generating, data-extracting, attention-destroying machine. The Blockchain brothers weren't rebels fighting the system. They were the system's next logical evolution. They were surveillance capitalism with the corporate logos filed off, repackaged with the language of anarchy and a get-rich-quick scheme. They simply found a way to make the users pay for the infrastructure of their own exploitation directly, through gas fees and token speculation, rather than indirectly through their data. It was the same business model, just with extra, incredibly inefficient steps. We have spent this entire time looking for an engineering solution to a human problem. The problem is greed. The problem is the relentless desire to turn every human interaction into a monetizable asset. Email doesn't need a blockchain now. It never did. What email needed, and what it still needs, is a business model that is predicated on either spying on you or tricking you into becoming a day trader. It needs a model where you just pay a fair price for a good service, like ProtonMail tried to do. A model so simple, so honest, it has become almost unthinkable. We are left exactly where we started, with a perfectly good technology, still desperately searching for a way to use it that doesn't ultimately lead to us being the product. And that's how we ended up trying to fix the world's simplest communication tool with the world's most complicated database, only to realize the problem was never the tool, just the people selling it. In the end, nothing of substance was really fixed, but a handful of people got obscenely rich, which I guess is the modern definition of innovation. Quick, legally mandated sanity check. Please do not take any of this as financial, technological, or ethical advice. This was a highly dramatic rant for entertainment purposes only, though arguably more transparent than your average crypto white paper. We are not responsible if you trade your life savings for a picture of a sad hamster, or decide to host your own email server in a basement guarded by a raccoon. So what other modern mess needs the oversimplified, highly caffeinated treatment? Drop your suggestions in the comments below. We're looking for the next big, dumb, beautiful problem. That is definitely still a thing for reasons no sane person can comprehend, and that's how that whole mess went down. Until next time, don't trust the algorithm.